let's kick this off. All right, Nikolas Volk, thank you for coming on to the Modern Startup Marketing Podcast. Nikolas is the co-founder of Kyte, a startup spelled Kyte. It's a startup founded in 2019. It's based out of San Francisco, California. At the moment, about 30 people or so. And prior to Kyte, Nikolas was an engineer at Uber. And your background, Nikolas, is in machine learning and deep learning software engineering. So lots of great knowledge, obviously, from there. On the funding side, it's a venture-backed startup. They've already raised $3.8 million so far. And the exciting news is that you're currently closing another round of funding. So that is awesome. I'm so excited for you guys. I want to just give a quick explanation of what is Kyte, right? So let's say that you don't want to buy a car. You don't want to own a car. Kyte gives you that easy access to cars on demand. So they're essentially, it's rental cars that are delivered to your door. So kind of like ordering food, but instead of food, you're ordering a car. Is that right, Nikolas? Did I explain it in an easy to grasp way?
Yeah, that's very accurate. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here for sure. And yeah, that's very accurate. The comparison with food delivery, Uber Eats or DoorDash, just not with food, but actually for vehicles.
Wonderful. So great. And just to give a quick blurb on how we met, we had talked just about your marketing team and growing your company and adding a marketing person, and that's sort of how we connected. And we've kept in touch. And I've definitely I'm following your company, seeing the growth. I'm so excited for you guys and what you've been able to achieve so far. So let's go ahead and jump in. I would love to ask you, what does marketing mean to you?
Yeah, I think on a very high level, it means to some degree the promotion and communication of essentially services and our value proposition to the right audience, right? And ultimately, I think the way I think about it is really essentially messaging into the world. Hey, there's something that is actually valuable to you, and essentially really bringing that message and that value proposition across to the right audience. I think that's probably what I consider marketing to be about.
Awesome. I love it. To the point, very to the point. And I explained Kyte from my perspective. Is there anything that you would say that I missed when I was talking about like what you guys do? You literally are connecting people to rental cars, and you do it in such a convenient way, right? Is there anything else you wanted to add about that?
No, I think it's very accurate. It's very simple, right? Like for consumers, yes, Kyte is the best way to get a car, and we deliver rental cars to people's doorsteps. If you're going on a trip for like a day or a couple of days, I think the kind of interesting aspect is that like we don't consider ourselves a rental car company, right? Like in fact, we're a logistics and transportation platform. So we don't actually own any of the inventory. We don't own any assets, any vehicles. But instead, we actually partner with existing fleets out there, with existing rental car companies, and essentially aggregate their inventory and then deliver it to people who actually need it. So it's really a platform. It's really about obviously the operational platform, the operational engine that makes all of that happen. And that's really our core, essentially.
That's awesome. So with COVID, has the demand for this type of experience just gone through the roof? Because I know for me, going into a rental car facility is annoying in and of itself. You have to wait in line, and you need to, and now during COVID, you're standing around with other people and you're waiting for your car. And then it's just an experience I don't really think about and love. So would you say that it's definitely exploded during this time?
Yeah, I think it's not super straightforward, the answer. To be honest, like when COVID hit us all in February or March, right? Like first of all, we really didn't know what to expect, and like we really didn't know exactly the kind of like impact on the business. And so, for example, like first of all, right, like I mean, travel really declined. Business travel also declined in these first couple of months this year. So that was definitely a decline of some customer segment. But you're totally right. I mean, the lion's share of our customers are actually not the travelers that fly into cities, but they're actually much more the local audience, which goes on weekend multi-day trips. And so for this type of audience, yes, we actually really focused a lot on essentially bringing essentially our value proposition really across in terms of like delivery. It's sanitized, it's clean, it's professional. We're not in the kind of like shared world. And that messaging that actually really resonated pretty well with our consumer base, and I think was actually a reason for our pretty strong growth over the last couple of months. So in general, I would say we had some headwinds, some tailwinds, and probably the net sum out of the tailwinds and headwinds, it's probably more a tailwind. So I think in general, the fact that our value proposition just really resonates with the consumer needs these days. But I mean, delivery is on an all-time high through a lot of different kind of industries. So that definitely helped us in general.
Absolutely. So can you talk about how you guys started this company? It's very recent, and I'm impressed with the funding that you've already been able to raise, and now you're raising more funding. 2019, like what was happening then? What were you guys thinking about, and maybe how did this idea come about?
Yeah, totally. So I mean, I have two co-founders. Ludwig, he was an ex-consultant at McKinsey, Berkeley MBA. Then Francesco, we actually did undergrad studies together. He's also technical. He was then a product manager at BMW. And so, and well, at that time, or in 2018, I was still working at Uber, also Uber Eats, really building a lot of the algorithms to essentially optimize delivery efficiencies here, and really on the geospatial side of things. And I think so it was very clear that like we were all essentially really fascinated always, but kind of like solving real problems, and I would say the real physical world really, and making essentially the physical world more efficient. So that was always a kind of common theme between the three of us. And then I think there were a couple of things that we realized. I think on the one side we realized, okay, look, like we live in cities across the world, like we don't actually own cars, like Uber is really great. We're super big fans of that, as just like the Uber product experience. But it's also not for all use cases, right? And so there are all these trips where Uber is just not the right choice for. Pretty much every trip that's still longer than kind of 30 minutes or like an hour. And so that was the one thing that we just felt, okay, there was a real consumer pain. The current experience of getting a car via traditional car rental companies or even with peer-to-peer rental is really broken, inconsistent, inconvenient. And so we just saw, okay, there's a real problem out there. The other aspect was, I think, pretty early on when we just like kind of bounced around ideas of like essentially starting different companies, it was really clear that, okay, if we want to do something, it needs to be able to become really big if it works, right? Like, and I think it's really this thing of like, okay, we all wanted to work with really smart people. And in order to build these type of amazing teams, you need to be able to attract venture capital, and in order to do that, it really needs to be able to become really big if it works, right? And so I think there were just like with Kyte, there were just all these things kind of there. Then ultimately about, okay, we're making the physical world more efficient. We're solving a real problem that we're actually really convinced about ourselves, and it's a really massive a market that we can actually go after. These I would say are the kind of like core things that we were like, okay, this is the right thing. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I think the people that are the co-founders is so important to get that team structure at the very beginning. They're the right people to work on the different pieces of the company. So that's great that it all sort of came together for you guys. And so what does the team look like now? You started growing it, you structured out the various teams. How are you organized?
Yeah, great point. So there's essentially operations, which is obviously a very, very big piece of the company, and vehicle partnerships, which is all essentially, yeah. I mean, Ludwig, one of my co-founders, he oversees these areas, really, really amazing in like structuring deals and then really building and running that operational engine. And we hired an amazing head of operations, Grace. She's amazing. She was a head of operations at Chariot and Blackbird before, and just really knows that space and is building essentially that operational powerhouse for us. So that's the one area. The other one is really essentially obviously like engineering, which I mean I still as of today I'm acting as the interim CTO here to really essentially design the architecture, really manage obviously like our engineers. We actually have a couple of engineers also in Munich, Germany, which is a really cool place in terms of just the access to talent there, which I think we see as kind of like a unique advantage for us, just given our background from Germany there. And then in terms of product marketing and growth, it's interesting so far. So as of now, essentially all the marketing and growth is essentially part of the product organization, which actually worked really well so far. And I mean, essentially my co-founder Francesco, he's a really deep product manager from his background, but he essentially just kind of like self-taught himself. Basically, everything that has to do with marketing, performance marketing, brand over the last 1.5, 2 years. And that worked really well and brought us essentially that, like 20 to 40% month-over-month growth over the last 2 years. But we also realized that kind of really going to the next step, we really need to kind of like, step up in terms of like our marketing organization to another level. And that's why we're actually going out right now and we're looking for essentially a head of growth marketing that can really actually own and build out that particular marketing and growth organization. Obviously still work very closely with product together, but really as a kind of more dedicated and special organization here.
Well, that's amazing that you said he kind of like self-taught different areas on product marketing and growth, and you're able to achieve that month-over-month percentage growth. That's wonderful. And so given that this is all just kind of happening in the past 1.5 years or so, what would you say is working well for you on the marketing side? Given your early stage, given the fact that there's limited resources, only now, right, you're looking for the head of growth person, head of marketing. What have you and your team, what have you guys focused on to really stand out and prioritize your marketing and your efficiency with that?
So I think one of the core things that it's always really important to highlight at that point is I think really like our constant focus on just like really on like essentially retention and right like really retain existing customers. I mean right, like our growth is fueled by a high degree really by these really stable cohorts of existing customers that are just coming back over and over. And it's just so critical to keep that going, right? And specifically, I think as you scale, there are all these challenges that essentially kind of the quality of the experience, the quality of essentially your operational engine kind of like degrades, with I think is challenging for any sort of like operational company out there that tries to scale up. And so really keeping that quality, that service level at a very high level, I think that's critical to keep that retention going. And I think that really has paid off so far. On the other side, I think the beautiful thing I think about our I would say our marketing mindset in general, right? Like is there that we have we're not reinventing a new category, right? Like we're not we're coming up with something completely crazy and we first actually need to teach people that they actually should buy us, right? Like on the other side, right? What we really do is like we obviously do something a lot better than existing players out there in terms of like the entire consumer experience of renting a car. But on the other side, like people rent cars for like more than 50 years out there, right? Like it's a kind of known product category. People are searching for it on obviously on Google and other channels, right? And so that there's this high intent search category which we can essentially use to scoop up customers, right? And so that means that actually a bunch of the usual paid and performance marketing channels, they actually work really well for us, right? So Google in terms of really high intent searches, but also some of the more top of funnel social platforms, they work as well well for us, just because people are actually if we can essentially grasp the people that are searching for rental cars, that makes sense for us, right? Like we don't need to teach them what we do in general. I mean, we still need to phrase the messaging and really bring across the value proposition of our service in particular. But in general, there are customers out there that already want us, right? So that's I think one reason why we haven't really invested a lot of efforts and resources in brand so far, and really the kind of like awareness piece. To be honest, we're actually really bad in that. I think I can definitely say that. And I think it makes sense. It made sense for us that we didn't really focus a lot on it, but we also get much more feedback. We get feedback every week of like, hey, you guys' messages are a little bit inconsistent. Like you guys don't really have any kind of consistent, strong brand. Like there's
who's giving you that message? Is it the customer?
I think we hear it from some customers, but also just from I think customers that are very close to us, friends, marketing experts like you. I think we're always kind of eager to get that feedback, and sometimes it's pretty hard feedback of like, oh, like this one email was really, I don't know, like this one email didn't really fit together with this other Facebook post, or like the English in that message or in that blog post was really bad. And so I think what we realize now is like we're actually at a level where it makes sense to invest some more resources in that sort of bucket in terms of I would say like brand, creative, really like the messaging. So I would say that's the kind of like big gap that we have right now that we need to double down a little bit more over the next couple of weeks and months.
That's amazing. First of all, that you have gotten so much traction with your paid and your performance marketing, your paid social, and you're probably doing the targeting, right? Getting that very specific to who you should be showing these ads to, who you should not be showing these ads to. Is it really competitive though? Are you spending a ton of money, or would you say that it's a pretty good spend related to, the customer acquisition cost is not that high?
It's a great question. So it's definitely it's definitely a competitive environment, right? On that side, I think there are ways to essentially really bid for some of the long tail keywords. For example, really obviously like flagging the delivery piece and flagging the sanitized piece. Like I think there are ways that we can essentially really highlight our positioning here. On the other side, right? Like in every market. We just launched our fourth market. Washington DC as of last weekend. In every market, essentially, our CAC and our marketing on the performance marketing side spend really is essentially a function of time being in the market, right? And so and correspondingly to our CAC, also essentially our CAC payback period, right? There are definitely customers which we acquire where we need them to come back one or two more times to really get that CAC in there, right? And to really pay back that CAC, but that's okay, and that's why that's obviously what is baked in our retention and right, like the product experience. But going back to that, to essentially that CAC over time in our markets, right? Like what we can really observe is, every market that we start off, it's very expensive. It's really about just like getting that initial kind of like set of customers. But then after a couple of months, then there's really these nice effects kicking in of like, okay, people are just like trusting us more in the markets. There are other data points around us. For example, some press articles about launches in the market. People are hearing us from other sources. People are hearing about us from a couple of different touch points via different channels, and we build that sort of like trust over them. So that's essentially that turned out to be actually pretty healthy strategy. That initial performance marketing spend really goes down over time. We could observe that now in pretty much every market that we launched in. That gives us enough confidence that it's okay to start spending first when we really open a new market.
I love that. You've gotten so much great learning, and it's still early on. It's fantastic. So, am I hearing this right? That you are really focused, your channels that you're focused on are the performance marketing, the paid search, paid social. You also mentioned press articles, right? Anything else that you're kind of using and working on within your marketing without having that head of marketing person on the team? Once you acquire customers, are you doing the email marketing? I heard you mention that. So what is that like? What does that look like right now, that engine that you've started to build?
Yeah, no, totally. I think you mentioned exactly the right things, and you're right. Like email is also very powerful, specifically for the reactivation components. Obviously, there are a couple of other things that we do. There's some sort of partnerships with online travel agencies, right? I mean, the Expedias and Kayaks of the world, where there's something actually, where there's some potential in these types of channels. There is some other local marketing partnerships, which go back to really our general managers in the respective markets. Really, they're essentially working with auto shops, with hotels, these types of things, which are actually very powerful and can really give you a very good base or like baseline volume over time. That definitely works also really well. What we haven't really invested a lot in throughout because of COVID now this year, but which we're starting to kind of dive deeper again now beginning of next year, and definitely in a kind of hopefully post-COVID world at some point. It's really essentially business travel, right? I mean, we know that our product resonates incredibly well with business travelers. I mean, the consistency, the reliability of the experience, it's just made for them. But we haven't really put any effort into like building out these channels. And there's a lot of opportunities in that field, right? I mean, integrations with other platforms, as you can imagine. Obviously, like collaborations and partnerships with specific companies out there. So that's a pretty exciting field for us that we'll start to dive into more. But also, I mean, you know how it is in a startup. It's all about the sequencing, and you can't do everything in parallel.
You can't, and you always want to, right? And you should always be doing more, but you only have so much time, and you've got to prioritize. Absolutely. Awesome. Sounds like you guys have been testing out a bunch of things, and they've been working out well for you. What would you say are the big challenges? What's keeping you up at night? What are you, in terms of marketing and growth, what are you trying to figure out?
Yeah, I think it goes back one more time, I think, to the kind of like brand and messaging piece, right? And I mean, I would say we spend a lot of time and efforts and hours and whiteboarding sessions on really kind of like these types of things so far. And I mean, like us as founders and with involving other people in that. And it's just, and to be honest, I think it's also one of these personal learnings, right? I mean, like, just like communicating like what your brand really stands for, like what is this DNA that is really baked in, like what do we want people to essentially feel and think when they hear Kyte, when they see Kyte. I mean, it's just really difficult, right? Like to get that right. And it takes a lot of time and iterations, and we're just like fully not there yet. I think we're still in the process of figuring that out. And I think like I think it goes back also to what I said at the beginning. Like on the one side, we're not a rental car company, right? Like we're a transportation logistics platform. On the other side, for the consumers, we're obviously offering car rentals. So we are kind of a car rental company for them, right? Like they don't, I mean, they don't really care if we're like a logistics platform, right? And so I think it's kind of, it's a little bit of a curse and a blessing at the same point, I would say, that on the one side, we're in this established segment of car rentals, which means like we don't need to reinvent that segment. We don't need to teach people like, oh, this is what car rental is about. Like no, like people know that already, which is good. But then on the other side, we're also doing something different than other companies out there, right? Like we're definitely establishing a new category within that segment. And so it's really about like, how do we communicate this specific value proposition in that segment? And really like, yeah, like really bringing all these different pieces across. I think it's something that up to that date, and I mean, it's on the one side, it seems pretty crazy, right? Like that, I mean, we're already now, I mean, almost like essentially, yeah, building out Kyte for like almost 2 years, and I think we've gotten to 4 markets, and we're still not 100% there that we can that we have nailed that brand value proposition like super crisp and clearly. And I think, and to be honest, I mean, there are different versions to get out of that, right? Like on the one side, you know, like we thought about in the past, okay, is the thing really to hire essentially these really expensive kind of brand agencies that do all of that for us? Is it more like that really needs to come from in-house? And I think we're doing the right things, and we're progressing on these dimensions. But it's still something that actually takes a lot of time. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing here.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about that, because when I work with clients, I think so my focus has been on that side, like the brand and the message and like, who are you for and what do they care about and what pain point are you solving, and how do you message that clearly and consistently across your different places where you live and where they can find you. And I do think that's the more challenging part. It's the more strategic part. Whenever I get questions on like, well, can you help us run the paid advertising? Then I say, I don't do that, but I'll bring in the expert that can do that, because I think that's something that you can get more comfortable with, because it's literally like you kind of figure out how to systematically do it. You look at the numbers, you make sure it's working. If it's not working, you scrap that. It's less of that strategic, like some of it is it's very quantitative. So the qualitative stuff, the gut comes in when you're talking about brand, when you're talking about feelings, right? And that's the hard part for startups, which is what I find that fascinating. But you get that sense that that's your next step. That's what your needs are. And so you're working on it. And I'm curious, how much have you brought in your current customers to talk to them, to ask them, like, what is it what's the value proposition, instead of you guys figuring that out, like coming into a room brainstorming? Do you bring in your customers? Do you give them surveys? Do you have like one-on-one interviews with them?
Yeah, I think that's definitely one thing that our product team is. I still think up to that date they're doing a really good job in doing that. I mean, I think we started doing that very early, right? Like, I mean, the one kind of, I guess, like product development philosophy that I really strongly believe in is this jobs to be done theory. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but like essentially this Clayton Christensen mindset of like really figure out like what is the job that your customer hires your product to do, essentially, or to accomplish for, right? So and I think in that mindset, I think really like interviewing customers, really having a lot of these customer sessions. I think that's something that we did very early on, and I think that is still going on. And I mean, our product team still has a couple of these conversations a week. I think we're doing that. On the other side, right? Like I think we're going in that from a very kind of like product centric perspective of like, okay, like right? And yeah, like let's really build the product for that. And I mean, like we have an amazing product designer, for example, like who then also can really like transform that into the user experience, into the I mean, into the user experience as well as the user interface. But like really this kind of the more, I mean, as you already called it out, like really more the bringing the different pieces together on another level, or that's I think really the piece which we're just we're not there yet, right? And I think I mean it's definitely, you know, like we have, I think we're, I mean, I'm not saying we don't have anything about that, right? Like I think we have some of the basic components, you know, like we have obviously like the color spectrum, and we have kind of like general kind of like content guidelines of like what are the keywords that we are using in our emails, and like how do we talk about the product, like all of these things are there. But I think it's this kind of like the really orchestrating that from another level. I think that's the kind of like piece that is missing, and really kind of like putting the pieces together and actually like coming up with like, okay, that's really now like a brand and messaging strategy. I think that's really missing. And I mean, and I even on top of that, right? Like I think what maybe also becomes clear out of that now, right? Like there's there are a bunch of different channels that we use, right? Like and there's so many different touch points where essentially people can kind of find us, and people can book with us, right? Because it's a very kind of contextual product. It has to do with kind of like activities and travel and business travel and all of these different things. And so what we really like, what we don't have right now is really somebody who kind of like puts all the things together, like really like orchestrates all these things, like and essentially establishes really like a roadmap and a strategy of like, okay, these are the different marketing initiatives now over the next couple of quarters. That's I think on another level kind of like what's missing. I think we're a little bit too much in the kind of like, okay, we'll do everything kind of more in a I mean, it's about growing this month, it's about then growing next month, but it's not really about the, okay, like what do we actually like how does that actually play out in the long term?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm hearing, and that you hit it on the head right there. It's the short-term focus versus the long-term focus. And so I see that quite a bit with startups that are trying to grow, and we just need to like figure out and go after this channel and that channel, and that's what we can expect now from each of these channels short-term. But then the long term, we invest the time in, we do it strategically, but we won't expect to get anything back from it until later, which is harder to say yes to, but eventually it needs to be part of the strategy too. So yeah, awesome that we kind of talked about that a little bit as part of the challenge. You already talked about COVID, how that's affected your marketing strategy, and how you're thinking about reaching out to like business travelers next year. You've got a lot of another, target audience out there, and you can message them differently. I actually wanted to ask you, because I saw a video that somebody creative put together for you guys, and it was and I can't get it out of my head because it was like so fun. A lady basically coming out of the water. I think she was just like surfing or swimming. She's coming out, and then somebody hands her the car keys. And so how did that come about? Who put that together? Who's the creative mind behind that? And what was the thinking around that? Like, why did you guys decide to work on that?
Yeah, I think it's really funny that you say that, because like that's this one thing where like I think over the last 2 weeks or so, like I got so many kind of just like friends or connections just like reaching out of like, oh, like I like this one clip that was really amazing. Like it's just and it's just like so fascinating how like I mean, obviously, like we produced, I would say over the last 1.5 years, like there were a bunch of different content pieces, but then this one thing was just completely sticking out and just like sticking in people's mind, which I guess it's a really good sign. Yeah, I mean, I think this is really one of these examples where like I think just like there was like the right combination of, I think, people like internally that just like really came up with that. There was not from what I know, there was not actually like a lot of I mean, like it was a very, to be honest, it was a very kind of scrappy project. I mean, Francesco, like, right, like my co-founder who does all the product marketing things, essentially, he just assembled a little team of like a couple of people acting, and then essentially one professional photographer, a videographer, like that also cuts these things together very nicely. And I think that was there was not a lot of I don't know, like no expensive agency involved. It was really kind of like very scrappy, kind of like bottom up, which I think is a good example that you can actually do some of these things kind of with actually you don't need a lot of budget to do some of these things. But again, I think that's one good example from maybe how you can do something effectively and cheap from within a startup. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't think all of our content is that funny, I think.
Well, it kind of, and if people want to find this video, which I think absolutely is a great idea to check out, something that was put together and really hits on what the value prop is of Kyte and a use case, right? That that brings the story together of where you help people get to that rental car. Is there something that people can search? Do you guys have it up on YouTube where people can look?
You mean the video?
Yeah.
That's a really good question.
And if I'll just check it out myself, and I can post that when I post the podcast episode. So that's no big deal. Because I think it's a really good example of being scrappy, putting together a video that explains the value prop and explains the use case in a really nice and fun way. So I'll be able to share that on the page.
But I'm pretty sure, like just YouTubing essentially Kyte rental car delivered, that should show it.
Yeah, awesome. Great. And so I've been getting questions from listeners to dive a little bit deeper on like something personal about my guests. And so I want to ask you if you can share something more personal about maybe how you've been handling this crazy year, or something about your career that you want people to get to know you a little bit more. Maybe even because I know that you have a bunch of interesting hobbies, right? Like mountaineering and climber and surfer and spear fisherman. So please, if you want to share about that, or something that's unique to you, what would you share to the audience that's listening?
Yeah, I mean, I think, maybe I can think about some other funky anecdotes about the spearfishing or surfing piece, but I think, I mean, this year, like, I mean, yeah, obviously it was crazy for a lot of companies. I think even though Kyte, or like we were doing fairly well, I would claim this year, right? Like, there was obviously still the kind of like hard moments of like, I mean, people working remotely and obviously, I mean, I do believe kind of like just like team morale and everything is like much more challenging to kind of like keep up in that setup when things are more difficult. I definitely think, I mean, it's not something that I just discovered this year, but I think it's something that became more apparent again this year as well, is really that in any sort of like, I guess like as a founder or in a startup, but like this, I mean, I would always call it the power of story, right? Like how important that is to keep these things kind of going and keep that fire of the story alive, I would say, right? And what I mean by that is, I think, but I mean, personally, I mean, I'm an engineer by training, right? I mean, I would say I would characterize myself as much more like analytical, rational. Also, I guess like I'm German, so that probably also means I'm not that funny in general. But I think that really fundamental, I guess, like personal learning throughout the Kyte experience and starting and building the company, right? Like, is really that never underestimate the power of story. And what I mean by that is, right, like really that I mean, it's always, I mean, there will always be these really, really hard moments. People are working, or like in any startup, like people really need to work really, really hard, and there will be a lot of difficult moments for a lot of people all the time. But I think there's one kind of like glue that just like makes that just like helps you to get over these like difficult moments, and that kind of like like makes essentially the team follow you, and really obviously like stick around and be not lose energy essentially, right? Like is really that story. And I think I think again this year, like in my opinion, right, like the best stories, they're the ones where like, okay, it's almost like it's really hard, it's almost like a little bit stupid, right? Like and I definitely think when we started the company, like we definitely fell into that category of like people were really like, okay, does this really make sense? And I think that's really what characterizes these best stories. And then it's essentially your, I guess, like your task as a founder to really tell these stories and invest in them and how to tell them, and essentially bring out okay, like, yeah, like this is kind of crazy, and we're going after something really, really hard and crazy, but we are essentially the best team to essentially crack that nut. And just like really constantly communicating these stories and investing in phrasing them and communicating them. I think it's incredibly important. And on a personal level, I realized, like, not just this year, also before, but I think it just became much more apparent that I was not that person. I was not on the level. I was not that good in doing that on an ongoing basis. And so for example, I took a communication coach this year, which I think helped me quite a lot in telling stories more compellingly, in really communicating the core messages to both internally but also externally. I don't think, there's still a lot of things that I need to learn, and I need to invest in that way, obviously, and I'm not there where I want to be. But I do think that was one of these, I guess, like personal things of like, okay, it's really important. I'm not good at it yet. Let's actually invest in it. I would say that's probably the one personal thing of that year.
That's great. And I think that it does make sense to pay up to invest in yourself, right? You notice that you need to grow in a certain area. You're strong in one area, you need to grow in another area. And I think it's great that you're investing in yourself and you're focusing in on that, and you realize that that story is important, and you want to get better at telling the story in the most meaningful way. So thank you for sharing that. That is awesome. So great. I super appreciate, Nikolas, you coming onto the show, you sharing a ton about how the company is growing, what's working well for you guys. Sounds like you've started to build that engine, and you're now it's time to focus your energy on the brand and creating awareness around the brand and the story and the messaging. But you've already kind of started to test things too, right? With realizing what the value prop is and making some creative that really resonates with people. So that's really fun that you're doing that. COVID and the effect it's had on your strategy and what your the opportunity is next year, which I'm excited for you guys. And then also talking about you on a more personal level, and how you're planning to grow in areas for yourself as well. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. If people want to reach out to you, you can find Nikolas on LinkedIn, Nikolas Volk. And to find out more about Kyte, you can go to drivekyte.com. That is Kyte spelled Kyte. So thank you, Nikolas, so much for your time. And it's been so fun talking to you. And you are actually funny, and you are fun to talk to. So don't think just because you're German, you're not, or an engineer. So thank you so much again. And I am so excited to hear about what's to come with your fundraising and your growth for next year.
Yeah, thank you so much.